Good evening. Welcome to the Politic podcast. Tonight we have GOUD Maragani.
Yes.
And you're running for county clerk in Salt Lake County. Why don't you, to start with, I kind of like people to tell us a little bit about themselves. I want people to know you personally. So why don't you just...
Yeah. So I think in a lot of ways, I'm a very different kind of candidate. I never really had any intention of running for office. In Salt Lake County, I wasn't groomed to be the Salt Lake County Clerk, and I certainly had no dreams of being county clerk. Sometimes that surprises people. But after the 2020 election, I got involved with the Salt Lake County GOP. I ran their election integrity committee, and we did a review of how elections were run in Salt Lake County. We found some concerning issues, I would say. And after seeing that, I realized that I have the professional background to be able to go in and make the changes we need to address those issues and to really take our clerk's office to kind of that next level of transparency, accuracy, and getting voters more engaged in the process. So on the professional background side, I'm a lawyer. I've been practicing now for almost 20 years, and I'm a compliance attorney. So what I do in my job is I study systems, I find potential failure points, and then I design the programs to prevent those from happening and to make sure that we comply with the law. So my job is to prevent problems from happening, and I think that's the perfect skill set for your county clerk. I'm also a veteran. So I served for more than 10 years in the Army Reserves and the Utah National Guard. During that time, I deployed to Afghanistan, Kuwait, Syria, and Iraq. And I think I bring that kind of commitment to country and to community, and I'll bring that to the clerk's office, and I think that would be very valuable.
So where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago in Woodridge, Illinois.
Illinois, that's a place of interesting politics. Let's just put it that way. So your schooling?
Yeah, I went to the University of Illinois at Chicago for undergrad, and then I went to Georgetown University for law school.
Very good. So how did you end up at Georgetown? That's a pretty impressive.
It was the best law school I got into.
Well, it's a pretty good one at that, right?
Yeah, that's how it works, right? You just apply to a bunch of law schools, just go to the best one.
Very good. So what got you into the law?
Actually, when I went to undergrad, I originally wanted to be a doctor, and then I went with a friend who was an anesthesiologist and watched open heart surgery. And after that, I realized that I did not want to be a doctor. And
I had a similar experience.
Really?
Yeah, I just didn't think that would work very well.
Yeah. So after that, I was an English major, and I enjoyed writing, I enjoyed debating, and so I ended up going to law school.
Oh, very good. So your family, where's your family from? Did they originate in Illinois then?
No, my parents immigrated from India in the 70s, and they've been here now almost 50 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and actually a lot of people have been able to meet my dad. He's been here probably for the last month. He's now referring to himself as the GOUD father on the trail. People seem to like that. When they retired, though, they moved to San Diego, and so they live there. I also have a younger sister, and she and her husband and kids live in San Diego.
So what did your dad do?
He was I think he started off as an engineer, and I believe he ended his career as a project manager at AT&T.
Very good. So intellectually, it seems like you've come a long way. I'm sure you did well in school.
Yeah, sure.
In order to get into Georgetown, I would think that you had to have done very well. So how does your background help you for this job?
Yeah, the way I see the county clerk's office is, and this is mainly on the election side, right? When you're looking at the elections and how it's run, it's about systems. And they use different systems to be able to run the election and to process your ballots and to count them. And like I said, in my job, what I do is I go around, I study systems, I find the vulnerabilities, and then I'm designing programs to make sure those don't happen. make sure we comply with the law, and then we're continuously improving them. That's what you need in a county clerk. So when we ran that election integrity committee last year, like I was saying, we found concerning issues. Just as one example, one of the issues we found is that they do not have chain of custody for ballot drop boxes. And what I proposed is that we'll use an app. We'll send out a team of 2. I'd like to have a Democrat and a Republican because I think bipartisanship is a good thing. And then we'll use the app to track the transit time for ballots from the ballot drop box back to the office, and then the weight of the bag of ballots when they pick it up and when they drop it off. I just want to note my opponent has actually said that this proposal is unworkable, but they're already doing it in Utah County.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So,
So who put that into Utah County?
It was, I think it was, is it Amelia?
Amelia.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Utah County is kind of a good example. They got in a fresh clerk, right, in 2018, and she came in with fresh blood, and she made a lot of really positive changes, and I think made Utah County kind of the most innovative clerk's office probably in the state. And we've had the same county clerk for 32 years now, and I think this is an opportunity to bring in fresh blood, a new perspective, and to really change how our clerk's office is run, because it's not just the election system. I've probably talked to thousands of voters. I'm a really active campaigner. And a big complaint I've heard is that people want to see longer hours in the marriage and passport division, right? It's only open from 8 to 5. Especially for younger people, it's hard to get away from their work. They're earlier in their careers. And I think we can do it within the current budget. So one of my proposals is that we're going to eliminate the I voted sticker. And so in 2020, the clerk's office spent almost $100,000 on I voted stickers. If you think about inflation, I think that probably is going to cost a lot more in 2020, this year. And I think that money would be better spent expanding the hours of the marriage and passport division to give us some evening and weekend hours to begin to accommodate people and make it more accessible to the young people.
Sounds like you've really studied this pretty well.
Yeah.
So in your analysis, did you find that it was mostly okay, or what?
We didn't find fraud, and I've been clear about that. But we found, I think, a lot of, like I said, issues. So another example is the clerk's office did not track the number of ballots that they adjudicated in the 2020 election. And just so people understand, when you submit your mail ballot, they use software to read it. And if the software cannot read your ballot because, let's say, you filled in a circle too much, you filled it in too little, you didn't fill one in, you filled in too many, then a team of 2 in the clerk's office, they'll look at your ballot and try to determine how you voted or you intended to vote. When they do that, one of the risks is that they can change your vote. Right? And in 2020, they estimated that they adjudicated between 9,000 and 26,000 ballots. And I think it's important because there's a state representative who's a Democrat who talks about how she lost her first race by 3 votes. So let's say that the clerk's office adjudicated 100 ballots in that race. Shouldn't we be able to look and make sure that it was done correctly? Because we want to make sure that the person who actually won.
I know at Weber County, it's interesting. They actually have a system, a software system that actually tracks. So you get a picture of the ballot, then they show what their decision is on there, right? And both of them weigh in, and it's all kept. All of that process is kept online. So you could easily go back and check through it again.
Yeah. Well, when we asked Salt Lake County for their logs of adjudicated ballots, they just said they didn't track it at all. And this is for 2020, and I think it's important that we track that information because, like I said, one of the reasons I'm running is I think there's risks in the election system, and we don't have appropriate controls in place to prevent them from becoming an issue. So adjudicated ballots is one example of that. And then another issue that we found is we asked them for a list of everybody who voted in the November 2020 election. And they track whether you voted, not how you voted, in spreadsheets, right? So they gave us their spreadsheets of And it was only of the publicly available voter records, because there's three categories. I think you know this, but there's private, withheld, and public.
Right.
And just so people know, the private and withheld, a member of the general public cannot see those. So when we requested the information, we were requesting it as a member of the general public. So they gave us the list of all the publicly available voter records and whether they voted. They also told us how many private and withheld voters were in existence for that election. Based on their own data, it shows that they counted more than 14,000 ballots that they cannot link back to registered voters. Now, I want to make clear, I'm not saying that there was fraud or that, there's 14,000 extra ballots. I think as a compliance attorney, when I design systems, I test them from different perspectives. So sometimes a system will look like it's working when you do one thing, but then when you test it a different way, it's actually not working properly. And you need to go figure out what the problem is. And I think that's probably what's going on here. They have not been able to tell us why the data shows that with any sort of evidence. So all they do is they assert that's incorrect. And every single time they say it, they have a different reason why, but they haven't come forward with evidence to show why it's incorrect. It's just unsupported assertions.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So sounds like you've learned this process pretty well. I know we had the Attorney General in here, and I mean the Lieutenant Governor in here last week, and it sounds like they've been making a lot of progress along with legislation that we've had come forward in really shoring up difficulties like that. And of course, I guess we wouldn't really, I mean, once the envelope's opened, you can't ever tie that ballot back to the person, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to.
Right. Yeah. You want to have a secret ballot. But I think that's a really important point, because they have Ballottrax, right? Which you can sign up for it, and it's supposed to track your ballot as it goes through the process. Well, I've been having a debate with the Lieutenant Governor, this is on Twitter, where about the final notification that comes out. Because the final notification tells the voter that your vote has been counted, but I don't think that's accurate, and I think they need to change it. So just so people understand, Ballottrax tracks your ballot based on a barcode on your envelope. So, and there's multiple steps in the process before your ballot is counted. Once your signature is verified, and that is your ID for mail-in voting, they separate your envelope from your ballot. That's when Ballottrax is telling you that your vote is counted, but there's actually additional steps that happen after that before your vote is counted. So they're going to have to scan it into their system. Your ballot can still be adjudicated after the signature is verified, and your ballot could even have to be duplicated if it's damaged. And in both adjudication and duplication, there is a risk that they could change your vote. And then if after those steps, it ends up being counted. So I think they need to actually change the language of that final notification to say something like verified for counting or ready to be counted. And that actually is also what the Ballottrax website says. It doesn't say that it can tell you when your vote's counted. If you go to the Ballottrax website, it actually says something like ready to be counted or verified for counting. They tell you that's where they can get you to. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
At that stage, it's part of a container that's going to be processed, right?
Yeah. And I just think, I think when we're talking to voters about elections and the voting system, it's really important that we're precise with language. And that's why it's important to me that something like Ballottrax is not giving people or misleading them into thinking that their ballot has been counted when it hasn't. Because one of my proposals is that before every election, I'm going to put out a notice telling people the pros and cons of each method of voting. Because I think I want voters to have a lot more information so that they can make informed decisions about the best way to vote for them. I don't have some personal stake in making sure that you vote a particular way, but I want to make sure that voters understand the different risks.
Well, it seems to me that the most vulnerable place in our vote by mail system is actually making sure the voter rolls are correct.
Well, yeah, that
right?
well,
It seems like that to me is going to cause the most problems, right? To make sure that that voter roll is up to date, it's accurate, it's sending ballots to all the people that wish to vote without sending extra ballots, right?
yeah. And I do think there's an issue with that. I've heard a lot on the campaign trail from people that their kids move out, for example, and they continue to get ballots for multiple years afterwards.
One of the things that Deidre Henderson said that I thought was important actually is that we do have to have personal responsibility. So in other words, if we're still getting ballots in the mail for our kids who no longer live there, we have a personal responsibility to inform the clerk that that ballot should be sent somewhere else, right?
Yeah, I think that's part of it, except that's assuming that everybody is. I think one of my issues is I think a lot of times we're making too many assumptions that people are all good. And really, as a compliance attorney, I tend to plan for the worst case scenario. And that is how you have to operate, I think, especially when you're talking about elections and voting. There is so much power that accrues to people that win elections. We have to recognize that, like, while 90% of people or more are good people and they'll do the right thing, there's a percentage of people that will not. And that's what you have to plan for. So, I think most of those people that tell me their kids' ballots kept coming after they moved out, they're not voting the ballots.
Yeah.
They're saying, in fact, sometimes they're saying, I contacted the clerk and it still didn't get updated. So
that's a problem.
Yeah, exactly. But we can't assume that everyone's going to receive the ballot and just throw it out. There's people that are going to actually vote it, and that's what we have to plan for.
Yeah, very good. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
My name is GOUD Maragani. I'm running for Salt Lake County Clerk. I'm a lawyer. I'm a veteran. After 32 years, I think we have a real opportunity with my background to take our clerk's office to the next level of transparency, accuracy, and getting voters more engaged in the process. I ask for your vote on November 8th.
Welcome back to Politic. We're here with GOUD Maragani, and it's fun to talk to you. And obviously, you've studied this quite a bit. Now, you've been getting into the district a lot of negative campaign things coming from outside organizations, which of course your opponent doesn't have anything to do with. But why don't we talk about that?
Yeah, it is really interesting. This is a local county clerk's race, and we have had a dark money PAC out of DC has mailed 2 8x11 flyers to support my opponent's campaign. So one of them was pro her, and then the second one that arrived with people's ballots was anti-me. And I think it's interesting because that PAC, it's called the Open Democracy Pact, is at least partially funded by George Soros. And I know when you say that, a lot of Democrats or liberals, they get really worked up about it. But the reason to mention it is that he doesn't live here. And everybody, it's partially funded. There's other people that have also funded it, but they all agree with his philosophy, right? He's a socialist billionaire, not from Utah, and I think he supports a lot of things that a lot of people in Utah do not support.
So what does it say about you?
It says I'm an extremist. I'm an election denier. I ran a committee that was a waste of money and a waste of time and went down a wild goose chase. We actually went up and because actually the photo on it is a really good photo of me. And so we did a corrected version of the flyer and posted it on the website. But just to give you an example, so they call me an election denier, right? And I've said at one time I did think the 2020 election was stolen. That's a fact. But what happened is that's what got me involved in the first place, because before that, I wasn't very politically active.
The fact is you thought.
Yes.
Right.
Exactly. But I wasn't really politically active before that. It was after that I got active. I ended up getting much more involved with the Republican Party. I ran the Election Integrity Committee, and then I decided to run for office. But if I had not thought that, I don't think I would be here today. These things all you know, it was kind of like an organic flow. So I can't go and take that back. But after learning more about the election system and then seeing the, I guess, lack of evidence of a stolen election, I changed my mind. And I don't actually think that's unusual for people to do. Like normal people, you may have an opinion at one point, and then you change it depending on the evidence that you see. And that's what I did. Another allegation in there is that that election integrity committee was a waste of time and it cost a lot of money. So number one, it was free. It was an all volunteer committee. It cost $0 to us. There were 2 grammar requests that we had to pay for, and a donor paid for them. So it was basically free. And we actually found a lot of concerning issues.
And so the county was reimbursed for their work in fulfilling that grammar request.
Yeah, exactly. There was one grammar request they charged us for. I actually appealed it above the county clerk, and her charge on us got reversed. And I appealed it saying they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And that's why we had to make this request. And the chief administrative officer agreed with us and actually reversed their charge. So, but we found all these issues. We took it to the state legislature, and there is legislation that was passed in the last session based on our findings. So one of them is we now have cameras on ballot drop boxes, which is an issue that we identified in the report. Another allegation they say is that I want to delay election results, but I'll just say this. You could not delay them any more than Salt Lake County already does. They take the entire canvass period plus additional time beforehand to count votes. So I would actually like to expedite the counting. I think that they take a long time. I think it's unclear why it takes that long, because I had reporters ask me about this and say, well, they're getting ballots for 2 weeks. But then I said, well, go and ask them how many ballots they're getting every single day after election day. And let's see the data, because that'll give us a better sense of whether they actually need the full 14 days afterwards. And the reporters weren't willing to do that. So I think there is definitely an opportunity here to expedite those results, and that's what I'd like to do.
So anything else in the flyer that...
Well, I mean, those are the main things. They call me an extremist, but I think that's a national Democrat kind of talking point, is that if you're running for county clerk and your goal is to make the system as transparent as possible so that everybody can verify what's being done, and to make the system as accurate as possible with different types of improvements like I've talked about, with my only goal is to make sure that every vote counts and that it actually counts the way that people fill out their ballot, that I guess that makes you an extremist.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective, huh?
Yeah.
I know I was called an extremist in the Salt Lake Tribune because I belong to some divisive groups on Facebook, like, Defenders of the Constitution and Parents United, right? Utah Parents United. I mean, it's interesting how what's extreme for some people is very different than what you might perceive as extreme.
Well, I also think people are kind of tired of the name calling. I've been trying to run a very unifying campaign, and I think I met with the League of Women Voters recently, and we had a nice 2-hour-long lunch, and they acknowledged that they haven't seen someone run for county clerk like this, meaning I ran a very unifying campaign. Like my campaign at even convention was about, I'm going to go out and I'm going to talk to independents and Democrats, because I think we all actually agree that we want the person with the most votes to win at the end of the day, right? I think this is a very unifying concept, and that a lot of my ideas and my proposals, I think everybody agrees with, and I've done it. I show up at places and I've had delegates, for example, in Salt Lake City. I was at Pride. I was at the Utah Asian Festival. I went to the Avenue Street Fair. I was at the 9th and 9th Festival, and I had delegates show up and they'd be like, you said that you were going to go everywhere and talk to everyone. You're really doing it. We haven't seen this before. And the League of Women Voters said the same thing, that we haven't seen a candidate run like this for county clerk or for really a county position. This is different. And that's been my goal the whole time. I think we need to get rid of the name calling, and we need to focus on the issues. And that's what voters are interested in. I think they're tired of hearing all these loaded terms being thrown around. And I think some of them are thrown around to discourage people from asking questions. So the election denier term is when you ask a question, it really doesn't matter who it is, like party-wise, but if they're running an election, then they'll start attacking you. And I think what people actually want is just for you to answer the questions.
Yeah.
And I said I'm a compliance attorney. And what I found in my experience is that the people that ask the most questions and encourage others to ask questions are the people that run the best systems. And that's my goal here. I want to run the best election system in Utah. And eventually, let's try to run the best election system in the country.
Very good. We're about out of time, but why don't you just look at that camera there and make a pitch?
Okay.
Right over here.
Well, I'll say this. I think we're almost at election day. So like I said, I think with my background, we have an opportunity after 32 years of the same management in the county clerk's office to take our clerk's office to the next level of transparency, accuracy, and getting voters more engaged in the process. It is my goal to work with voters with an open door policy and to continuously improve our system until we have the best election system in Utah, and then we're going to shoot for the best election system in the country. So I ask for your vote.
Very good. Thanks for coming in, GOUD.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate
it. Really a pleasure to meet you and learn a little bit more about you, and we'll see you next week.